Can you hear me? Well, good afternoon. Let me tell you first, because I have only 40 minutes and I'm all for the time, I have to admit that. I will just tell you a couple of sentences about myself and what is my Agile story, the main part. And then I will walk you through something I strongly believe is very, very necessary in any Agile implementation whatsoever in organizations, institutions, whatever industry, be it software or education or culture, whatever. So I started actually beyond software. So I'm known for bringing Agile to education. And then I brought it back to software after enriching it a bit. And then I keep this dance back and forth, from industry to industry. And I find it every time very, very, very sensible to go Agile and to start something I call Agile strategic thinking, which is not a novelty. There is a term and there is a meaning to it. But I have my own interpretation. So let's start. Whenever I enter the institution and whenever I start talking about, you do normally the assessment and then you talk with people and then you try to find out what are the key pains and why they want not necessarily Agile, because sometimes they're not sure about Agile, they want to change. And then these are some of the main key pains. So we talk a lot about pains, such as rapid changes leading to multitasking and loss of focus. You know the pain? Who knows the pain? Hands. Unpredictability and bad planning. Wow, that one is really awful. Do you have problems with this? Who has? Who doesn't? One hand. Great. Inefficient meetings, complexity, interdependencies, and vague requirements. And this one sounds familiar. Vague requirements. Main headache. Low efficiency, whatever it means, actually. I wasn't able to find out what does it mean, really, low efficiency. Too many ideas, insufficient resources. You know this one? Familiar? Reactive behaviors and lack of commitment. This one? You know when you behave like very, 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 very critical. Do you have that? Do you have people that are very, very, very critical? And they criticize all the time. And when you ask for a solution, they say like, Lack of vision, lack of innovation, we struggle with that a lot, and poor quality, which is last but not least. And then when we end up talking about the key pains, then I tell them like the institutions and organizations and companies, they go Agile and there are surveys that show that these are the key reasons for Agile adoption. And the main three ones, and normally they keep a steady pace, like these keep from year to year, you always find the three at the top, is accelerate product delivery, which means time to market. Then enhanced ability to manage changing priorities. So Agile helps us enhance ability to managing changing priorities and increase productivity. But what happens actually is when we are done with key pains and when we are done with key reasons for why to adopt Agile, we create more pain. Because with the key reasons and the techniques and the methodologies we try to apply, what we do basically, as the slide shows, is we spend a lot of time in trying to find a way out mechanically, without full understanding. So if you ask someone how the week goes, they would say, amount of time I spent being productive is this much. And then the amount of time I spent doing things that I thought make me more productive is that much. Do you have that in your experience? Who does? And then we go into key myths. So whenever I go into company, I go through all these phases. And what happens at the end is like, I found that there's a trauma that people already tried, and there was some Agile adoption, and they tried to solve some problems and key reasons, and I won't enumerate. And then they created myths. So my job is when I go there, not only to find out what's wrong, but also to find out what's wrong with Agile implementation at the company. Because you now have to struggle with that as well. You have to convince people that Agile is okay. So key myths about Agile are that it's a silver bullet, and it's not. And then that it's anti-planning. And then you have companies, they say, oh, come on, it's too much planning. Then you have, it's about processes. And then they have, no, it's all about people, talking, communication, no results. Then you have, Agile is undisciplined. And then you have, oh, no, Agile is too disciplined, depending on a company. Agile is easy, Agile is hard, and so on. So my conclusion about Agile adoption and solving problems at the companies that need change is that Agile, in many of the cases, almost I think in all of the cases I worked as an Agile consultant, trainer, coach, is that a chief cause of problem is or was a solution. So what's wrong then? I ask myself. Is it about coaching? Is it about people that bring Agile to companies? And you would say yes, could be. Is it about approach to organizational development? Like you just take one part of an organization, one part of a system, and you're trying to make it healthy, and everything else is not healthy then? So what happens with a healthy part of a system when the organism is not healthy? Do you know? Well, not good thing. Is it a system itself? Is there a system that can work in any mindset, in any system of beliefs, in any system of values? Or we have to find out what is the proper match between the system and the mindset? Could be. Is it people? Do we have problems with people themselves, with individuals? I would say no. This one is absolute no. Because people twist themselves to adapt to systems. If system is wrong, then people will behave eventually in a wrong way for them, for themselves, for the results, and for the whole company or team organization or whatever the social group is. So I'll walk you through something I know that is very useful from my training experience, which is sort of a diagram of what one organization is. What are the components of an organization? And I will walk you through this to show that Agile is a mindset, that it is thinking, but a proper one, and it can't be reduced to only productivity. Actually, it's almost impossible. And nowadays, I don't work with companies that want just to coach one team, because I find it not useful. I find it like a waste of time, because sooner or later the system will make changes to the team and the team will desist. So let's see what is the organizational diagram. Normally it consists of structure and culture, and the structure is something very palpable to us. We can feel it, we work in structures. And it starts, believe it or not, with something called vision. So whatever you do, absolutely whatever you do, will take you to some goal, be it that you are conscious of it or not. So normally companies, and as we all know, they have visions, and visions are pretty much nice, and it's written on paper, it's published, and employees are supposed to know what the vision of a company is. Do you know the vision of your company? Who does? Hands up. Who doesn't? Okay. And then you are supposed to work and to make the vision possible. So then we say, okay, we have vision. Now we are supposed to create something which is mission, which means that there is an aim in what we do. That's why we value ourselves. That's our contribution to the world or to the community or to family, whatever. And normally, it's not achievable. It's just like too huge to start making it at a step. You don't know what the first step is. You have to plan a bit. You have to split it down. So you split it into something you call big organizational objectives. like big ones, really big ones, something you really want in order to feel that the identity is a proper one, you have vision, and that your mission is on track. That's still too big. You then have to split it into something we call strategic objectives. And I guess you're familiar with strategies of your companies, are you? Who is? Not many hands up. Who's not? Like no idea what the strategy is. Okay. And then strategic objectives, they're measurable. You do create KPIs there. They tell you if you're on a right track. They tell you if your main goal is compromised or not. You want to check that very frequently, very often. Then you split it further down into something you call action plans. And then you have proper concrete actions. And then normally organizations would expect to have results like we did all the planning, we know our goal, we know our strategy, we know all our steps. No one in the company actually knows the whole line, the whole the relationship between the goals. But it doesn't matter. Everyone knows what's his own or her own job. That doesn't happen, actually. Results don't come from there. It's too mechanical. And the communication is awful. Normally, you never communicate well. Bosses don't communicate well vision, as we can see. People don't know what is the main purpose of the work they do. They don't know to what they contribute. Then we have to talk about something else, which is culture. If you want to have a really, really super successful company, there's one thing you need to have super developed, and it has to be honest. And that's values. Like, what is the value system of a company you work for? What is the value system of yourself? Because you work also for yourself. And if you don't have that, then you're probably very doomed if the values are not okay. Do you know the values of your company? Like, you can tell them. Do you have more than 5? Who doesn't? Do you have values? Do you personally have values? Like, you're conscious of your values? Okay. So values are too big and too abstract to understand them. So we have, I believe that trust is very important. I believe that openness is very important. I have to ask myself, what do I mean by openness? What does it mean to me? And when I ask myself that, I will split it further down. I will go into some context. I will make some principles. Like in the situation when I find myself like not willing really to hurt someone and I still think I have to say things I think, I will say what I think. That's a principle. And that supports openness. And then we have something we call behavioral styles. And that's the part that I find absolutely missing in all the Agile frameworks. It means that people behave somehow according to the principles to support the values, to support the vision and mission. So if you look at the styles, they're like visible. It's something that you can sense, something that you can describe, some behavior, you know. We can talk about it. It's easy to say, he never speaks about himself, he's very private, or she's very talkative and stuff like that. Styles can be grouped. And actually, there is a lot of styles. There is a lot of groupings. There is a lot of diagrams. But there's one main thing, and we will go into that further on. Styles can be constructive or defensive. So you can behave in order to achieve something, and then you build something, you construct. Or you can defend yourself in a passive or aggressive way. So I'm pretty much sure you recognize already the styles in your teams. And the main effort for me and for the teams I work with is at this level, at the level of styles, of communication, of opposition, of hidden complexities, of we don't tell things and we don't listen. Basically, people have problems with listening. And then you have individual behaviors that support styles and so on. The left part of this diagram is structure, and the right part is culture. And it's, of course, a generalization that is necessary for for understanding. What I find super, like it's easy to memorize, and I think it's very, very educational in so many ways, is this saying, which says basically vision without action is daydream. So if you're not able to make a connection between your vision and your actions, then you're probably just daydreaming. It might not be. It might be that you're lucky enough and then you walk your way and it's okay. But normally, it's good to keep the track. And then vice versa. Action without a vision is a nightmare. So today, I do something, and if I don't know where does it take me, it could be, there are bad scenarios, that it takes me to a nightmare. Like if I smoke too much, for example. Stop smoking. So every to-do has its why. Absolutely every to-do has its why. Sometimes it's easy to see the connection. Sometimes it's very complicated. Sometimes probably impossible if it's like a subconscious thing. But what we know about product development and what we know about organizational development and about team development is that if it's not value-driven, if there are not values, principles, styles to drive me, and if I don't make an agreement about that, I will probably go for one of the three. Plan-driven, and we know that plans today are not effective. Deal-driven, meaning I will have one client, one customer. I'll make everything possible for that client. I will die to make all features, functionalities just to survive. And then there's no more that client. So what happens? I quickly look for another client. It's the problem that, for example, in gaming industry, organizations that have just one game, they have that problem. So they need to find another product or another client and stuff like that. Or for worse, if it's not plan-driven, value-driven, or deal-driven, then it's probably improvised, meaning that there's a chaos. So what do we know, or what do we need to know when we start developing or working at an organization is question above all the questions, what do you want? Just you have to ask yourself, what do I want? How badly I want that? That's a question for every single company, for every single institution. That's a question even for education. When you have an education system, I work at the University of Belgrade, I forgot to tell that, it doesn't matter. You have to know what do you want out of your students. You have to know what do you want out of the content you teach. What do you want in terms, what is the value for you, for the people, for the society, for the communities, for anyone? So you have to define value. And value is something that forms value systems. Once you're done with that, you have to decide on how important it is. Because you're going to want a lot of things, I guess. And then time is a limited resource. We have to choose. So then you have to think, I want this, and how bad I want it. Do I want it more than something else? Then you go into a question of, is it doable? Is it what I want doable? Can it be done? Is it too unrealistic? What do I have to do in order to make it doable? Then you go into a question, how big it is. We all have problems with super huge, big requirements, because it's not the same to write an article or to write a post and to write a PhD thesis. You agree? Because one is super complex and the other one is relatively simple. So you have to know how big it is, and you have to think about your strategy. How I'm going to eat this? Where do I start? From top, from middle? Though the kid is enthusiastic, and we are sometimes. Then, once we are done with this, we tend to do something which is not good at all. And that's what I find in every single company I work with. So, sorry, companies. There's this sort of a blind planning. So, I say, I want that. It's really super important. I want it immediately, of course, just like for yesterday. And do it. So I don't go into details. I just close my eyes, I transfer the responsibility, and I hope that the person that will have to make it will not do the same. Well, the thing I find out is that everyone does the same, except for the IT departments. I mean developers. And sometimes we get to blame developers for ruined strategies. Have you that in your experience? Well, that's not okay. Because it's not on people that make something to decide on vision. I mean, they can, absolutely. But then they have to know the vision, they have to participate in all the processes that take you to the vision, and they have to be able or available for deciding about that. So that's not okay. Because you have to ask yourself, if you are a vision creator, if you are a top manager, if you are the chief executive officer, who decides for you if it's not you describing precisely the requirement? And let me tell you, it's super hard. It gives you a lot of headache when you have to sit down, think about your huge, big goal, split it further down into smaller goals, and be able or capable to define at a level of acceptance criteria that we expect from all the developers to have the input, the process, and the output. So I need to know, as someone that leads the business, what do I want? But not what do I want in terms of abstract terms, like I want to be a millionaire, I want to have a 4% share market and stuff like that. I need to know input, output, input, process, output. Like when my client does this, this happens and that he gets the result. So, Paula, audit. So if the requirement is vague, you have to ask yourself, is it vague? Because when you say, and that's what businesses do, is when I want a woman in a pastoral setting, this is a woman in a pastoral setting, but this is about. So you can get basically whatever that looks like a woman in a pastoral setting. And what happens is that you look at this and you say, no, 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 this is not what I wanted. I wanted a face. I wanted to see a face, not someone that gives me her back. This is for, Serbian-speaking public. So, is it clear enough? Is your requirement clear enough? I will try to is there any, how would you translate pukao sam? I'm done. I'm done. Okay, this is like a divorced pair. They live together still, they have 2 kids, and they quarrel all the time. It's a funny series. And then he says, I'm done. And she says, what do you exactly mean by that? So is it clear enough? And I want to walk you through and show you a video that I find very instructive. It's from Alice in Wonderland, because she goes through many not really informed decisions, and she ends up crying, and at the end she says, oh dear, I do wish I hadn't cried so much. So it's really, really important to know all the answers to all the questions I mentioned today. Let's watch the video. It's like a short one, but very, very instructive one, and you'll probably see all the questions represented.
Get her into strange and wonderful adventures in the magic world called Wonderland.
Ja to radimo, to neće. Well, I'm stubborn. So watch the decisions she makes.
Wonderful adventures in the magic world called Wonderland.
He's expecting the Queen. I'm much too big.
Deal-driven development.
Ouch!
Oh, my ears and whiskers.
If you please, sir. I'm getting smaller and smaller again. Why? It's the fan.
And then she starts swimming and
Get her into strain.
And she says, like, I do wish I hadn't cried so much. Because if you do things as she did, and I think Agile shouldn't be, or at least strategic thinking shouldn't be like in Wonderland, and that's what happens a lot of times, then you just go for what's there. And that's why you need a vision, and that's why you need principles to guide you. You can't just go and pick up what's there, satisfying your immediate needs. And then you cry. And then you say, well, I wish I hadn't done that. So I find this movie very sad, and actually I find the book itself very sad. Oops. Then the next question you have to ask yourself is, when do I do things? When it's time, when it's too late, how much should I do upfront? How much should I plan upfront? Let me tell you, do you know what you're going to do in 3 weeks' time for a weekend, if it's not wedding? Anyone knows? How complex it is. Is it a simple thing that you can do quickly with small number of components and satisfy your clients? Or is it something more complex? Is it even too complex? What is the level of fidelity you need? Because sometimes we tend to make things perfect. Do we need all of the components of a system at the same level of fidelity? Do we need them all at the same level of perfection? Normally, we don't. And this is something I find very instructional as well, which is slicing, dicing, and chopping our requirements. So if you have something big and you wanted to make it, you just really, really want to have it done, then you have to slice, to dice, and to chop. Because you might want to have like a small piece of onion, But then you can't just hold the whole piece and cut the small one. There's no standard in it. You don't know how much it's going to take. There's no system. So whatever you do with your requirements, this is the way to proceed. Then we do create some expectations, because all we do is we split because we want to make some results. And we create expectations for ourselves, for our clients, meaning that we promise things. We say, when we do the vision, mission, goals, strategic goals, action plans, it means that at the end, you're going to have this. So we create expectations, and we are awful at admitting that we're not going to meet our expectations we have created. Do you have that in your experience? You promise something, you wait till the end, client comes in, then you say, we don't have what you promised, what we promised. Do you have that? I guess you do. There is this excellent book. I find it very, it's neuroscience. It's easy to read, not super complicated, not scientific language. Who is in charge? That's the title. And what is said there basically is that when you expect objects to conform to a set of rules, and if they don't, you just stare at them. Read the book. And now the game. So in terms of expectations and how we think in routine ways and what drives us, I just want to show you the game quickly. You have it on your papers. There's 2 horses and 1 rider. You can play it afterwards as well. I'll explain the rules. So you cut the papers where the lines are, just there. You cut the papers when the lines are, and you try to put riders on the horse's back without folding. Without folding. Anyone play the game? No one? Really? A long time ago. Do you remember? Oh, this is awesome. Okay, try to solve, watch out your emotions, because at a certain point you'll get frustrated. So you have to put riders on the horses' backs, like a normal position, without folding. So there's nothing you can do about it. So you can't really fold, you can't put, they have to be clearly visible, both riders and horses. Anyone got frustrated? Anyone managed? No? You know, like sitting on a horse's back. Well, where the back is, that's the question. Okay, I'll just let you there. I will show you the end, okay? We have to continue. Well, then when we talk about the results, so I'm walking you through the cycle, so we get now to the results. Then we have to talk about something which we call integration. Because normally when we make something, we have to integrate parts, right? So, and if you ask me, what is the main word, what is the main topic, what is the main thing in Agile, I would say integration. And imagine how happy I was when I found out this conversation, which was like a month ago or something. This was an article, a blog post written by a Google developer that found Agile adoption annoying and a complete nonsense, like from the talk from the beginning of this presentation. And then there's an explanation and why he finds it a nonsense. And guess what? The man that created Scrum answered the blog. So you know his name? Jeff Sutherland. So, and look what he says. So he says basically that the concept is misunderstood, that that's not agile and stuff like that. But at the end, he says something like this. As for Google, as long as they have one code branch for 15,000 developers and deploy multiple times a day for multiple products, they are agile as far as I'm concerned, no matter what they are doing. As long as they're having working software every day and don't tolerate developers who can't deliver it, I think that is awesome. So integration, actually, if you think better, is a huge challenge nowadays, especially when we talk about something that we now, I think, can call integration skills. Because when people have to integrate a product, they have to be able to know how to do it. So what I'm making and what you're making needs to be integrated. So I have to understand parts of your job, and you have to understand parts of my job, because we have to integrate it. It's easy when we build it like a big bang up front. We know all the elements. We just measure and cut. It's easy. Then we put it together and it's done because we know what we are making. But it's not easy at all if we make something innovative, if we make something that we don't know the shape of. If we make a woman in a pastoral setting, then we have to be able to integrate. This is integration. This is how you organize self for integration. And integration normally means complexity. There is a lot of elements that need to be coordinated. And what happens when we fail? If we go back to the picture, you'll see the support network below. So if they fail, nothing happens. They will just, you can watch that. It's easy. They just walk out, stand up and walk away. They don't get hurt. So by integration, I mean integration skills and safety environments to be able to integrate safely. Can we organize for efficiency? You know that, ladies know this. When you're in a rush, this is what happens. Now, the quality can be very, very, very problematic here, especially if one hairdresser is a senior and the other one is a junior, right? But let's say that we can find some quick fix to that. This brings us to people, and then I will finish there, because that's the full circle, and to their mindsets. Because people, they are soldiers of structures. They are. We love structures. We need rhythm. We need barriers. We have to put barriers. Because that's the way we communicate. That's the way we keep our safety needs fulfilled. But structures can't be, especially nowadays, too strong. Because they will limit creativity. They will limit innovation. And they will limit communication. So we have to be very careful nowadays of putting systems with light structures that guide, not limit, just guide us. Just so we know that when we are at the edge, it's sort of like watch out and think twice. Not to stop us, not to make us go back. Individuals can put as much effort as they can't integrate. We need teams, but when we have teams, then we have a bunch of people doing whatever they want. So we have to teach them how to integrate. And nowadays we also talk about something, there are cross-functional teams and self-organized teams. So when I'm talking about the circle, I'm actually talking about more than a circle. It's not only values, principles, behavioral styles, and individual behaviors. It's something which is a total paradigm shift. It's a mindset, like an absolute mindset change that we are living today. And that people that lived in an industrial era in 17th, 18th, 19th century didn't have problems with. And I'll explain that. So in order to have teams that can integrate, we need teams that can make consensus. They can listen. Do you know the movie 12 Angry Men? Who knows? Okay, this is the consensus making. There's one person that doesn't know if the answer is yes or no. And 11 thinks yes. Things are clear and obvious. And then you have all circles of consensus making until they stay, I don't know how many days in this room, just to be able to listen to the man that doesn't know if the answer is yes or no. So the frustration is super high, but at the end, of course, it's a movie. They change their mind, and hidden complexities appear at the surface. So they are able to see what is the real consequence of cause and effect. Do you know what is this? Is it a duck or a rabbit? Who sees duck? Who sees rabbit? Duck and rabbit at the same time. Actually, we tend to see duck, or we tend to see rabbit, or we tend to see both. But then what we don't tend to see is something new. What do you say? Yeah. So the problem here is that when we have these huge paradigm shifts in civilizations, we tend to match what we know. We look at a new thing, and then we tend to match what we know to what we see. And then we can't see the real thing. So this is something monstrous, because it's unknown. That's exactly what happens with Agile implementation. We see it as monstrous, because it's not known. It's not traditional management. It's not new management. It's a shift in paradigm. And here I finish. Do I have 5 minutes more? One thing I want to leave you with is that today we live in this era of total change, as I said. The first one happened in the Middle Ages, when we switched from orality to literacy. And it's all about information, at least from my point of view. Orality is something that makes information super valuable, because we make it orally and we transfer it orally, and then we have to run, and eventually we die by running. Just to say what happened. And then in literacy, we started publishing it, and the distribution was more frequent, and more people knew the information. It was still valuable, and there were people knowing and people that didn't know, so we had teachers. And then today, we don't have that. Information is super cheap. Information is something that we just want to get rid of. We filter it, optimize it, search it, and we do all sorts of things just to get to the proper thing we need. And there's no one that knows everything about a specific subject. That's why we need cross-functional teams. That's why we need self-organized teams, because there's no one that knows absolutely how to organize people. Cross-functional teams means that people that learned everything about their single disciplines, that learned everything about their single industries, have to meet in order to be able to integrate results. And they have to understand each other in terms of discipline and in terms of how I listen and how I integrate. That's the age we live in. That's why we need agile thinking. Because if we don't have that, we can't integrate. We have to understand that there's no one that knows everything. I'll go through this, and I'll just show you this one simple thing before I end. I'm a fan of Amy Barnhouse. I don't care what you think. And I went, when she died, I went to London, to Camden, to pay the tribute and everything crazy fans do. And then I was really, really pleased when I read that they found her notes, like things that she wanted to do, like to-do lists. And then there's this one small part where she talks about when she was age 17, talks about what she wants to do once her record gets published, or even worse, once she signs a deal. And then what she says there is treadmill, buy flat in London, buy car, no. Get gym membership, buy a sunbed to put in my flat, live like the bombshell I really am, and get teeth fixed. So it's a mixture of vision, mission, and simple action plans. If you look at a to-do list, at yours to-do list, at the to-do lists of your team, you'll see this dance back and forth. So what you have to do is not finish like Amy in Wonderland, just getting for what's there. You have to make order and to have your vision clear, which is like the bombshell, and to have your action steps that will take you to your dream. and please listen to others.